Welcome everyone to Life Lessons from Movies, presented by my organization, the Zen of Hollywood, and me, your host, David MacKay. In this segment, we extract life lessons from movies and then use simple and practical tips to help us improve our lives and become happier, which I believe we all desire. Okay, today's theme is how to manage our expectations and find acceptance. And we'll examine this theme through the good film called Passengers, starring Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence. Please know there are spoilers ahead. Okay, this film is set in the future in which this spacecraft carrying over 5,000 passengers is going from Earth to another faraway planet, to an Earth colony on that planet, presumably because the quality of life on Earth has diminished greatly. Now, the entire journey is about 120 years, and along the way, there's some kind of a malfunction on the ship that prematurely awakens one of its passengers, a guy named Jim. And he awakens to find out he's the only one awake. And even worse, that he's got 90 years left until he reaches his destination. He also discovers that there's no way to go back into hibernation, right? He can't reverse the process. There's no one to help him. He can't reverse the course of the ship. He's basically stuck on that ship. Now, after spending about a year trying to figure things out, trying to resolve matters unsuccessfully, he realizes he's going to die there alone. And so he sees this other female passenger in her hibernation pod. And even though he knows it's immoral, he decides to awaken her up. Now, her name is Aurora, and she and Jim fall in love with each other, right? And everything is going well until she eventually discovers the truth that Jim intentionally woke her up just for her to be with him. And of course, she's furious, right? Because she knows she's also stuck on the ship. So she's furious and they end up breaking up until they realize that there's a major problem on the ship that really threatens the lives of everybody, right? The ship could really fall apart, forcing them to come together to find a solution. And by coming together to find that solution, they end up getting back together again. So remember that final scene in which the passengers have all awoken, right? Because they arrived at their destination and Jim and Aurora are presumably dead, right? Because it's about 90 years later. And we hear that voiceover from Aurora who says, "You can't get so caught up on where you'd rather be that you forget to make the most of where you are." What an important message this is, because this is what we often do, right? We set our expectations for future goals, thinking that by arriving at them, they're going to give us something that we don't have. In other words, they're going to make us happy by having that goal instead of enjoying ourselves where we are now and finding happiness in the present moment. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with having future goals and expectations of getting there, but we can't invest our happiness in them. We need to enjoy where we are now, find our happiness in the moment, even as we're working towards those goals. So obviously, one of the themes of this film is about expectations and how they can get us into trouble. So let's talk about this. How can we manage our expectations and find acceptance where we are? Because we know life quite often doesn't go in the way that we plan it to. I mean, let's be honest. If we take a look at our lives now and what we had expected our lives to go, the direction that we wanted to go in, probably our lives are much different from those expectations. So we really need to learn how to manage them. The first point I want to discuss is the difference between unreasonable expectations and minimum standards, right? Unreasonable expectations are set, of course, by our ego, because our ego has certain drives that are unhealthy. Now, we all have needs that we need to get met. That's obvious. But our egos go too far. It really becomes obsessed with getting these needs met. And it goes too far because it goes into fear. It fears that by not meeting this need, then this is going to be poorly reflected on us, that we're going to lose something, that there's going to be irreparable damage. So we need to get in the habit of asking ourselves, when it comes to our expectations, what's the fear here? What's the fear here behind my expectation, so we can see whether it's unreasonable or not. For example, we all know what it's like to have unreasonable expectations, high expectations for our romantic partners. And then inevitably, when they don't meet those high expectations, we become angry, upset, resentful, and that can lead to a breakup. And this is what happens quite often. So for example, if I expect that my romantic partner, that she will always look good every time that we go out, and I expect her to look extremely beautiful, well, this is unreasonable, of course. And this is based on an ego fear. I'm in fear that this is going to be a poor reflection upon me, my self-image. So if we really take a look at these unreasonable expectations, we'll find that our ego is focused excessively on approval, control, safety, and looking good, that self-image. So the key is to deal with our ego fears behind these unreasonable expectations, talk to it, and find an alternative to modify those expectations so that they are reasonable, right? By dealing with those fears and telling ourselves the truth of love. So what we really need to focus on instead of unreasonable expectations are these minimum standards, right? And standards are the minimum criteria that we deserve that represent our rights that we all have on this planet. Now, standards come not from fear, but from love, because as we stand up for ourselves with these minimum standards, we're really saying to ourselves that we are worthy enough to defend our rights, not aggressively, not passively, but assertively. Standing up for ourselves, our rights, is an act of self-love. And of course, we're going to do the same for others. So for example, a minimum standard is that I have the right for people to respect me. Another standard is if there's a conflict between me and another person, I have the standard that we're going to sit down, talk about it, communicate about this problem, and work it out. So the first part of this is to establish minimum standards, not unreasonably high expectations. The last thing I can do to manage my expectations is to find acceptance for the situation. Everything is as it should be. Because we live in a universe by design, that everything happens for a reason, I can write down all the positive things connected to this otherwise negative event in my mind. What are some positives that I can take from this event? I can make a list, and that can help me, again, to accept this situation. Okay, so what did you see as a major life lesson from this film? I would love to hear from you in comments below. And for more movies, tips, and life lessons, please go to my website, thezenofhollywood.com. That's thezenofhollywood.com. And please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. See you next time.